find a special place to unwind.
When you feel right, look at yourself.
Inside your mind you see connect eternity.
1993 was a big year for Sonic the Hedgehog. In that year we got multiple spin-off games such as Sonic Spinball, Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, and Sonic Chaos, all games of which I have never played before, but anyways. Not only that, but we got two different cartoon series in that same year, Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, which was aimed towards younger kids, and Sonic SatAM, which was clearly aimed towards older kids with having a much darker tone. Now, considering the success of both Sonic 1 and Sonic 2 at that point, Sega would be crazy not to release another Sonic game shortly after. However, this time around, with the Super Nintendo still selling much greater numbers than them, Sega decided to do something that would greatly fuck them over, as instead of releasing a new console, they decided to make an add-on for the Sega Genesis called the Sega CD. Now, the Sega CD was made to play CD-ROMs, which did offer much more storage space, and it allowed for supposedly higher graphical detail. However, as I said before, Sega choosing not to make another console and instead create an add-on for the Sega Genesis would go on to bite them in the butt, as the Sega CD sold like absolute dog shit. But we're not here to talk about Sega's terrible decision making, well, at least not in this video. Since Sonic at this point was Sega's official mascot, and given how well both Sonic 1 and Sonic 2 sold, they decided to release a brand new Sonic game for the Sega CD, fittingly titled Sonic the Hedgehog CD, or just Sonic CD if you fancy. Now, what do I think of Sonic CD? Well, it's actually one of my favorite Sonic games of all time, but this game has many flaws, so let's get into it right now. Firstly, I'd like to mention that this game is unique in the fact that it's the first Sonic game ever that has two completely different soundtracks, an American soundtrack and a Japanese soundtrack, due to the divide between Sega of America and Sega of Japan, with Sega of America believing that the Japanese soundtrack wasn't extreme enough for a Western audience, and thus they changed almost every song in the original Sonic CD. But, if you know me, you know I play every Sonic game in their original form, so I'm playing this game in the original Japanese soundtrack. However, with Sonic becoming increasingly more popular, the divide between American Sonic and Japanese Sonic began to increase. Now, for Sonic CD in particular, I always found the Japanese soundtrack to be superior in every way to the American soundtrack, and it's for that reason why whenever I replay the game, I tend to choose a Japanese soundtrack. Now, in terms of visuals, I think Sonic CD is easily the best looking 2D Sonic game ever made, as thanks to the Sega CD, it was able to capture much more vibrant colors compared to both Sonic 1 and Sonic 2. And it's not just that, upon replaying the game, I realized Sonic CD is a very dense package, with each stage having at least 4 variants, with a past version, a bad future version, and a good future version, each with their own different variants of music, by the way. That means that there are 4 different variants of each stage, which means that there are 84 different stage variants if you count each act of each stage in this entire game. That just goes to show that Sega wasn't playing around when they made this game, which in my opinion is definitely worthy of praise. Now, one last note about the music. This is the first Sonic game ever that features a vocal track, something that will become popular with every Sonic game to come. And this game got 2 vocal tracks, one for the American side and one for the Japanese side. The American side got the ever popular Sonic Boom, and the Japanese side got Toot Toot Sonic Warriors, which in my opinion is the better song. But no matter what you choose, both songs in my opinion embody the essence of Sonic the Hedgehog perfectly. Now, diving into the game proper, for the first time in a Sonic game, we don't immediately start off with gameplay. No, Sonic CD starts off with a bang, with this amazingly animated sequence that shows off both the capabilities of the Sega CD, as well as the ambition of Sega during this time period. And it's not just that though, this intro shows off everything you need to know about Sonic the Hedgehog. In the previous games, you were given a mere glimpse at the feats Sonic could do, with a vague sense of flow and speed. But this is what Sonic is really about. Now, narrative-wise, this game has a similar plot to both Sonic 1 and 2, but this time around, Dr. Eggman, instead of trying to take over Sonic's planet, he sets his sights on a little planet that's called, well, Little Planet, which, as stated in the Sonic CD manual, is an extraterrestrial body that hovers over a place called Never Lake 1 month out of the year, and it's said that it's supposedly home to these mystical gems called the Time Stones that allow one to control the flow of time freely. However, Sonic, being the young, adventurous, free spirit that he is, goes to check out Little Planet. But upon arrival, he realizes that something is terribly wrong, as the planet is chained to the mountainside with Dr. Eggman's face on it, mind you, as he intends to make Little Planet his own. However, Sonic is having none of this, and springs into action without hesitation. It's not going to be as easy as the last 2 times, however, as Sonic has to make use of the Time Stones this time around, in order to go back into the past and destroy the robot generators, ensuring a good future for Little Planet. Now, from all of this, we can tell right from the beginning that once again, Sega has really ramped up the stakes this time around, with the story being about both environmentalism, like the previous 2 games, and the aspect of time travel this time around. And similar to the previous game that introduced a new fun character in the form of Tails, this game introduces a new character as well, in the form of Amy Rose, the first main female Sonic character to the roster, and through her hobby of playing with fortune cards, she traveled to Little Planet in hopes of meeting her knight in shining armor, who is Sonic of course. And there are many instances throughout the game where Amy will run up to Sonic and hug him, which I find adorable and hilarious at the same time. Though Sonic doesn't reciprocate her love, as he's just too cool for a relationship. Though of course, Sonic having a heart of gold at the end of the day saves Amy's life whenever she's in danger. He just won't get into a relationship with her. It's just their dynamic, and honestly I find it harmless at the end of the day. But moving on, as we move through the game, you'll notice these signs throughout the stages labeled either past or future, and that brings me into the main gimmick of Sonic CD, time travel. Unlike the previous 2 games where it was clear that you were meant to get through the stages as fast as possible, in Sonic CD, exploration was clearly the main focal point of the gameplay. Now, as I said before, Sonic CD is a story about time travel, and the way you go about doing that is by running past a signpost that says either past or future, and after you run for about 4 seconds, you'll end up traveling through time, to either the past or the future. Now in concept, I think this aspect of the game could have been handled really well. However, in execution, it's one of the most infuriating aspects of the game, and I'll explain why. Firstly, maintaining your speed for 4 seconds might sound easy, but combined with this game's shitty level design and enemy placement, it feels damn near impossible. Secondly, there are times when time travel just doesn't work due to this game's terrible collision detection, where if the slightest thing touches you when you're trying to time travel, it'll end the time travel sequence, which means that you'll have to run around the stage like a dumbass trying to find another sign. And lastly, traveling to the future is entirely pointless, since you have to travel to the past in order to destroy the robot generators and the Metal Sonic projections as well, which will result in a good future in the 3rd act of each stage. So all the future signs around the stage are just obstacles to avoid, and honestly they really do not need to be there at all. And you know what's ironic? There are certain sections in this game where it's specifically made for time traveling, like these loops in Palm Tree Panic, or these 2 springs placed right next to each other in Collision Chaos. So honestly, I don't understand why Sega made this mechanic so fucking infuriating. But I will say that there is one positive to this time travel thing, and that is the returning special stage method from Sonic the Hedgehog 1. So, if you collect 50 rings by the end of the stage, there's going to be a giant ring that'll pop up, and if you enter it, you'll enter a special stage. And I'll say this, Sonic CD's special stages are some of the best in the entire series, and that's just because of their straightforward and to-the-point nature. All you have to do is destroy all the UFOs before time runs out. And whenever you do not touch the water as it'll cause the seconds to turn into milliseconds. However, within 20 seconds or less, a UFO will appear that will grant you more time if you hit it, which is some very intuitive design on Sega's part. Like, I never understood the hate for these special stages in particular. I can understand the hate for the Sonic 1 and especially the Sonic 2 special stages, but I can usually beat these special stages in at least 1 or 2 tries. But once you beat the special stage, you'll get one of the 7 time stones. And if you get all 7 time stones, then you'll ensure a good future in every stage after. Which, in my opinion, kinda renders the whole robot generator thing a moot point, as you can just avoid them and just collect the time stones in order to get the good futures if you want. Though I do like the fact that destroying the robot generators does give you a good future in the 3rd act, and it overall contributes to the main theme of environmentalism, which is extremely apparent in this game, which is why I believe that Sonic CD, in terms of theming, is the strongest of the original Sonic the Hedgehog games. But you know what? I'll tell you something that Sonic CD isn't the strongest at, and that is the level design. Now, a common issue about Sonic 1 in particular is that Green Hill was the best level in the entire game, and every level that came after it, well, besides Starlight Zone, didn't capture the same speed and fluidity that Green Hill had. However, this issue was fixed in Sonic 2, with each level, well, besides the last 4 levels, having a much greater emphasis on flow and speed, similar to Green Hill in Sonic 1. And in that sense, Sonic 2 kind of feels like a remake of Sonic 1, taking what worked in Sonic 1 and doing it better in every single way. However, Sonic CD on the other hand, somehow takes the problems of Sonic 1 and makes them infinitely worse with its level design. And when looking at it in that way, Sonic CD feels more like a regression than a sequel. It's like Sonic 1.5. It's not as good as Sonic 2 because it doesn't take what Sonic 1 had and improve upon it, but it has just enough redeeming qualities that it's better than Sonic 1. And there's actually a pretty good reason for that. So you see, Sonic CD and Sonic 2 were developed at the exact same time, with Sonic 2 being developed in America by Yuji Naka with Sega Technical Institute, whilst Naoto Oshima developed Sonic CD in Japan with his own institute. Ultimately, both games were meant to be sequels to the original Sonic the Hedgehog game, improving upon it while also keeping what works. And in the end, both sequels did that, but in differing ways. With Yuji Naka, he went with the simplest approach, taking what worked with Sonic 1, cutting out the fat, and making beautifully designed levels for the most part. Sonic 1 was always a winning formula if you knew what to do with it. You didn't have to add much, you just had to take what worked and improve upon it. However, on the other hand, Sonic CD and that team, they decided to go with an approach of adding different things to see what stuck. Now, I don't think every gimmick of Sonic CD is bad. As I said before, the time traveling could be handled better, but for the most part, I think it's harmless. But Sonic CD feels like padding. For this video, I decided to do 3 runs of Sonic CD. One where I get all the time stones, one where I got all the robot generators, and one where I just bum rush through the game. In the run where I bum rush through the game, I beat the game in 40 minutes. Just 40 minutes. That goes to show how hollow Sonic CD is if you don't play the gimmicks. But with all that being said, I want to go over each level in the game and highlight what I find to be good and what I find to be terrible. Now, in terms of actual design, like I said before, Sonic CD is actually the best looking Sonic game thus far. Not only that, but Sonic CD has this magical 90s spark that I haven't seen replicated in any other Sonic game besides maybe the Sonic Riders games. Each level feels completely different from one another and has a completely different vibe to it. Palm Tree Panic is the Green Hill of this game, yet it has its own identity, with the giant ramps that launch you into the air, to the unique enemies scattered all around the place, and even the color palette, which is much more bright and cheerful compared to the previous games. Hell, even the music gives off a cheerful vibe. Just give it a listen. And it's not just Palm Tree Panic though. Every stage in Sonic CD, regardless of level design, offers these dreamlike environments that just radiate pure 90s nostalgia that you can almost get lost in. Out of all the classic Sonic games thus far, I'd say Sonic CD has the most visual and thematic identity. Now in terms of level structure, as I said before, Sonic CD chooses to have more dense and tightly packed levels due to its emphasis on exploration. Instead of longer levels, you have levels that have much more stuff cramped into it. Take a stage like Collision Chaos or Quartz Quadrant. Both stages are massive, featuring a ton of different pathways that are fairly easy to access. What this means is that Sonic CD is filled to the brim with secrets, whether that be things like extra lives, rings, or even shortcuts. And even after having played this game 3 times for this video, I still have yet to fully explore each level thoroughly. This does, however, present an issue when it comes to the aspect of speed in this game, as, aside from Stardust Speedway and Palm Tree Panic to an extent, you won't be moving very fast in Sonic CD's levels compared to previous games. Collision Chaos is a perfect example of this, as the stage is filled with pinball bumpers and springs that make it very hard to go in a straight line, and honestly, every time I finish this stage I'm left wondering what the creators were trying to do with this stage in the first place. Like, Collision Chaos feels like spring yard zone from Sonic 1, but a much more complete level, but at the same time, it still feels unfinished. Like, there was so much potential here with the aesthetic and the music, but I guess they just didn't know what to do with it, and it turned out the way it did. Now, a stage that I actually find pretty enjoyable is Tidal Tempest, which is probably one of my favorite stages in the entire game. And I'd say in terms of being a water level, it's right behind Hydro City Zone from Sonic 3. Now, that being said, it's not nearly as interesting as Hydro City Zone, but I find the overall vibe of the stage to be very soothing, especially with the music, though it's probably the easiest stage in the entire game. There's not a lot of obstacles to deal with, and the enemies are pretty hit or miss if you just avoid them. But in terms of being a water level, I'd say Tidal Tempest is one of the best water levels in Sonic history. Now, moving on, I'd say Quartz Quadrant is my second favorite level in the game, mostly because it's a pretty fun stage to speedrun if you're not trying to explore that much. And it's also because of the banger music, which did not need to go so hard. Just give it a listen. So, moving on to this point in the game, what you'll notice about Sonic CD in comparison to its predecessors is that Sonic CD, while having very distinct and beautiful looking levels, Sonic CD's levels in comparison to games like Sonic 1 and Sonic 2 don't serve the same gameplay purpose as they used to. Now, what do I mean by this? Take a stage like Green Hill or even Emerald Hill from Sonic 1 and 2. Both of these stages serve as a playground to introduce the player to Sonic's momentum-based movement system and high-speed gameplay. Or even a stage like Chemical Plant, which teaches the player the complete opposite of what Green Hill and Emerald Hill does. It shows the player that, while yes, speed is a good thing, you should also be mindful of your surroundings and don't just hold forward the entire time. And it serves to do this by mixing in platforming with the high-speed gameplay, serving as both a skill check for the newer players and a challenge for the more advanced players. Now, on the contrary, let's look at a stage like Aquatic Ruins, which serves to teach the player a completely different lesson from the previous two stages. Aquatic Ruins shows the player the importance of taking the faster and more challenging path, with there being a top path that's faster yet more challenging, and a bottom underwater path that's slower and less challenging. Now, compare all these stages to Sonic CD stages, and I think you can see the problem. Sonic CD stages don't serve much of a purpose outside of their visual flair. Gameplay-wise, they all kind of blend together. Now, that being said, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but it just means that Sonic CD's stages inherently have much less depth compared to its predecessors. Now, surprisingly, I find Wacky Workbench to be the exception when it comes to this, but not in a good way. So, the main gimmick of Wacky Workbench is that the entire floor is an obstacle, since if you touch it, you'll be sent flying to the top of the stage where all the obstacles and enemies are. So, the interesting twist of this stage is that you want to actually stay at the bottom of the stage and avoid the top at all costs. Basically, it's a level entirely devoid of speed in favor of tight platforming. Now, in concept, I actually think this is a pretty solid idea for a Sonic stage. It forces the player out of their comfort zones by testing their ability to platform, rather than the speed aspect that was very prevalent thus far. But, in execution, this stage is just as hollow as Collision Chaos, as the platforming itself is a cakewalk and you can beat both acts in less than a minute. Also, if you're a speedrunner, then this stage is probably your worst nightmare, as it discourages movement in the forward direction. So, Wacky Workbench, cool concept, terrible execution, moving on. Now, on the other hand of this spectrum, Stardust Speedway is the complete opposite of Wacky Workbench, as it is almost entirely focused on speed with very little platforming. Now, it's certainly better than Wacky Workbench, but once again it suffered from the same problem. This stage has no substance apart from visual appeal, with Stardust Speedway clearly being designed with speed in mind, but in execution, you'll be stopped constantly by random bullshit, removing any sense of flow from the stage. And just like that, Sonic CD's most iconic stage leaves me wondering, what the hell were they thinking when they made this? And to be completely honest, I can apply that same sentiment to the entirety of Sonic CD. This game physically makes my brain hurt when it comes to its level design. It almost makes me believe that Sega just put random stuff in each stage and hope for the best. Like, can anyone tell me why this section is in Collision Chaos? Why is there an entire hallway full of springs that only serve to slow you down? Or how about this section in Stardust Speedway where there's 4 pathways intertwined despite the fact that you can only go on one of them and the rest take you to buttfuck nowhere? Or how about these boss fights which somehow they made them even worse than the previous 2 games? Like seriously, like I have no idea how they fucked this up so bad. So to sum up the boss fights in this game, cause they're pretty much just nothing burgers. The first boss, just get behind it, hit it a few times and it's dead. Second boss, it's pure RNG, you just have to get to the top of the stage. Third boss, just hit the bubbles until they all disappear. Fourth boss, run on a treadmill. Fifth boss, just stay on the platforms until they launch into the air and hit the motherfucker 3 times. Final boss, just get hit and just use your invincibility frames to completely destroy the boss in a few matter of seconds. Like, can you guys see what I'm talking about? Like, I'm not the type of person to get hung up on the negatives of a game because I can usually find the positives and usually just enjoy the game as it is, but Sonic CD's negatives are just in your face. Like, Sonic CD's levels feel like something a toddler would make if they knew how to make video games. So, all in all, we have terrible level design, shitty unnecessary gimmicks, and overall lackluster gameplay. Now, with all that being said, you may be asking yourself, even with all these flaws, how can I possibly still say that Sonic CD is the embodiment of Sonic the Hedgehog? Well, it's not as complicated as you may think. It's just that this game made me understand the original vision of Sonic better than any other Sonic game I've ever played before. So, let's go back a minute. It's July 26, 1991, and the world is first introduced to the character Sonic the Hedgehog. He was bold, daring, and unapologetic about who he was. He was an embodiment of freedom to a younger generation of gamers that, up until that point, had probably only played Mario. And while yes, Mario was the father of platformers and set the rules for the gaming industry, Sonic was that cool uncle that didn't really care about the rules and did whatever he wanted. While Mario traveled to La La Land in the sky and uninspired environments, Sonic was running through fields, mountaintops, cities, caves, labyrinths, and so much more. And all of this while having a banging soundtrack and a confident smirk on his face. That is what Sonic the Hedgehog was, and to me, Sonic CD is the perfect representation of that idea. It's not perfect, I think I've made that pretty obvious thus far, but when I look at this game, I don't see a rushed mess or a hollow experience. All I see is pure vision and passion, something that, in my opinion, Sonic has been missing for a very, very long time. I have no problem saying that Sonic 2 is a better game overall, but Sonic CD is a game that I've played and completed way more than I've completed Sonic 2. And Sega, for all of its flaws, really put their all into this game in particular with the colorful and diverse stages. The opening and ending cutscenes animated by Toei, the same people who made One Piece and Dragon Ball Z, mind you. The absolutely fire soundtrack that just radiates pure 90s nostalgia and just takes me out of this world. And the new rival. Metal Sonic. A cold, dark, and hollow reflection of our main protagonist, and the first character that actually poses a threat so far. Now, of course, Dr. Eggman is the main villain calling all the shots, but he's always been played more for laughs or not taken seriously, especially by Sonic. However, with Metal Sonic, not only is his design cool, not only is he a challenge for Sonic, but he was designed intentionally to play off the theme of this entire game, the idea of nature versus technology. Now, as I previously stated, Sonic CD is a story about time, that much is clear. But the way that time plays into the theme itself is something the game shows off in a very subtle, yet also prominent way. So as you all know, you have to go around each stage and destroy the robot generators in order to create a good future, but I never actually went into detail on what the good futures entail. Now, when looking at the bad futures, you can tell that technology has completely taken over, leaving a very bleak and polluted world, obviously because of Dr. Eggman and Metal Sonic's influence. However, what I find interesting about this is that in the good future, while yes, nature is definitely very prominent and plays a major role, there is still an element of technology present with the mechanical trees in Palm Tree Panic and the greenhouse aesthetic entitled Tempest, which then gives us an alternative to this theme of nature versus technology, having the two work with each other and support one another in order to create a better future overall. And I just gotta say, for a game about a cartoon blue hedgehog, that's some pretty deep shit. Now moving on, we have our final encounter with Metal Sonic, Dr. Eggman's ultimate creation. Now I'm very split when it comes to this boss fight. On one hand, from a storytelling perspective, this is absolutely one of my favorite set pieces in Sonic so far. Having us race instead of the actual traditional boss fight. It's unique and it's quite fitting for a character like Sonic. But, on the other hand, the actual structure of this boss is very clunky and all over the place, and it feels like the designers wanted to make this boss challenging, but didn't know exactly what to do, and as a result, they added a bunch of bullshit. Now, similar to Stardust Speedway, you're clearly meant to gain speed in order to stay ahead of Metal Sonic and win, but the boss was just not designed with that in mind. So, more often than not, you'll run into spikes, get stuck on a random slope, or in most cases get hit by Metal Sonic's rubber banding ass attacks that are unavoidable at certain angles. Like, you guys don't understand, I desperately want to love this boss. And as a matter of fact, I love this boss in almost every other incarnation, such as Sonic Generations and Sonic Mania. But this version just has too many flaws for me to give it praise. But, once you do defeat Metal Sonic, you save Amy, who gives Sonic a big ol' hug, aww. And then we move on to the final level in Sonic CD, Metallic Madness. Now, I just gotta say, this stage is probably my favorite in the entire game, and I mean that completely. Like, this time, unlike the previous stages, the level design in this stage actually provides a challenge while also being extremely well done. A lot of people hate the gimmick where you shrink, but I always found it to be harmless considering it doesn't really affect you that much in terms of hindering your progress. And not only that, it only occurs in one act, so it's not that bad. And it's not just that though, this is probably the best final level we've seen up until this point in Sonic, as previous final levels didn't have nearly as much personality as this stage in terms of artistic design as well as music, which I will say again is a banger. Just give it a listen. Now, to me, Metallic Madness is an example of what Sonic CD was probably aiming for, and despite the fact that the game itself isn't perfect by any means, I can't help but love it anyways. Now, without further ado, let's move on to the end of Sonic CD. Now, as previously stated, Sonic CD's bosses are the worst yet, and that applies here too. And unlike the final bosses in Sonic 1 and 2, you actually get rings this time, making the boss even easier. Now, I'm not entirely sure how you're intended to beat this boss, considering there's almost no openings to attack at first, but your best bet is to just tank your way through and collect your rings until it's defeated. Like always, the music is a banger and it makes it feel like a final boss, but the boss itself is just really underwhelming. But, once you do defeat Eggman, Metallic Madness begins to collapse as Sonic rescues Amy once again as the two escape and land safely back on Earth. Now, if you get the bad ending, Dr. Eggman manages to escape with the Time Stones, despite the fact that Sonic kills him, and Little Planet remains forever bound to Earth. But, if you got the good ending, Little Planet goes free, rises into the sky, and vanishes in a brilliant light show, thanking Sonic for his good deeds. And without hesitation, Sonic sets off on his next great adventure. And with that, the Sonic CD Mega Review comes to an end. Sonic CD is a very odd game. A game that has so many great ideas, so much passion, so many things it wants to accomplish, but it just couldn't come together as a solid Sonic game. There's so many things that this game gets wrongs and that I want fixed. The level design, the bosses, the gimmicks, you name it. Sonic CD is frustrating, to say the least. It's annoying, and even infuriating at times. And yet, for me at least, Sonic CD is what Sonic means to me. I love it. I love it so goddamn much, I can't stop playing it. I love when Sonic does crazy, bold things like this. It's what made him so different from his competitors. And yes, that boldness definitely comes with a cost. It never stops me from playing the games though. Even when everyone was against him, I was on his side. He kept moving forward, no matter what. And it is for that reason why I can confidently say that I love Sonic the Hedgehog CD.